It's time for a video that is positively the cyborg, the cola freak, and the definite sexiest man in the straw hats. It's Franky himself. Franky is not just a machine, he is a sex machine. His charisma is absolutely unmatched in terms of any other character I've ever seen. But that comes as no surprise when he's like a Popeye Johnny Bravo hybrid of a character, with just a touch of Elvis in there to make him irresistible to absolutely everyone. The One Piece staff even seemed to agree with me, what with this absolute thirst trap of official art they uploaded specifically for Franky's birthday. God damn. And if his looks, his catchphrase, and his riz wasn't enough, it's all topped off with the fact he wears nothing but a Hawaiian shirt and Speedos. This is the #1 Florida man. I'm not even American, and I know this is what a Florida man looks like. And if you're still not in love with Franky, if you're still not convinced on his alluring charm, my man pulls out the coupe de boue. This is what peak male performance looks like. You may not like it, but if you're not striving for this, man, just give it up. No, but in all seriousness, Franky did captivate me the second I met him. Like many other Straw Hats, I wasn't expecting to like him or care about him. But damn it, does Oda sure have a knack for making me care deeply about characters. What can I say? I can't help liking stupid men. But under Franky's goofy nature is certainly a lot of intelligence. His looks and behavior completely contrast the massive brain this guy has. Lest we forget, he can not only build nearly any kind of machinery or structure if given the materials and time, but he quite literally made a cyborg out of himself. This cyborg design became more extreme in the time skip, and I know a lot of people don't like his current design, but it only feels to be a natural part of his evolution to make even more improvements on himself and his body. After all, he sees his body as a project to build and expand on, and we'll get to why he has this line of thinking later. But before I talk any more about Franky, it's sponsor time. While we cannot all be pirates in our current day and age, we can still be pirates online, and we can do that safely with Atlas VPN. If you're not a tech nerd like me and have no idea what a VPN is, a VPN makes it so all your internet searches, browsing, and history is completely protected. It's sure to hide your IP address and it keeps you safe from spying, especially from the pesky FBI agent in your computer who's watching you look up Zoro's big fat boobies as we speak. But Atlas VPN isn't just a VPN, it also protects you from pop-up ads and malicious malware. It can also give you access to any country's version of Netflix or Disney Plus. I mentioned Disney Plus specifically because did you guys know that the entirety of Bleach is on Australian Disney Plus? And with Atlas, yes, you can take advantage of Atlas's huge discount. You can get a 3-year subscription from $1.83 a month with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Even better than that, if you use my link in the description below, you get an 82% discount for premium subscription. Snatch that deal while it's hot, and thank you so much Atlas VPN for sponsoring this video. I won't let you down. Okay, now let's get back to the cybernetic man of my heart. A criticism I've noticed Franky gets is that he doesn't really develop. Apart from his upgrades, he just kind of stays on the same wavelength for the majority of One Piece. I totally understand this criticism, because when you have a favorite character, you want to see them grow and change. But Franky is kind of in that area of character where he doesn't exactly need that. Hear me out. Franky isn't exactly young, and I know anyone over 30 can heal and change, because development as a person doesn't stop once you're an adult. But what I mean by this is, Franky knows who he is and what he's about the second we meet him. Because even though he is somewhat running away from his past, he has already been through some of the toughest moments of his life when he was a teenager. In that way, he acts as a parallel to Robin, with the two of them both running from a past that has caught up to them. Except Franky had grown from those struggles in a more healthier way, while Robin's own struggles and trauma were still fresh in her mind and continued to hold her back. This being prominent from her reaction to the Buster Call, and how she was ready to let go of the Straw Hats to keep them safe. Robin and Franky are, in fact, connected by circumstance, one of them holding the plans to a powerful weapon, and the other being the only person known to be able to read those plans. It's a burden they both hold, but at the end of the day, it's what brought them them together, and in turn, it's what brought the Straw Hats to Franky. Anyways, the stars aligning for the Straw Hats aside, there are two main questions that come with Franky's character. The first question is, why does he operate and enhance himself? Especially since cyborgs seem to be a topic of differing opinions in the One Piece world. Not to bring Sanji into this, as I do with everything, but Sanji certainly doesn't find it fun to be a cyborg. Extremely ironic, considering he even called Franky out for being a freak due to him being a cyborg all the way back in Thriller Bark.
すぐいろんなもんを仲間にしようとすんじゃねえよ。ただでさえうちにはタヌキだのロボだのいろいろいんだぞ。おい、俺はロボじゃねえ、サイボーグだ、バカ野郎。もう人間じゃねえことは確かだろ。ベースは人間だってんだよ。
I don't want to believe this is any kind of foreshadowing in terms of Sanji's story, but Oda is kind of insane like that, so who knows. Sanji differs, of course, due to other elements of becoming a scientific machine. In fact, Sanji seems to be on the bad or evil end of scientific discovery, while Franky is on the good side. We have even discovered in recent manga chapters that Franky is a huge Vegapunk fan, this being due to his experience on Karakuri Island when finding Vegapunk's work. And his fanboying is honestly very cute in itself. Pushing the sidetracking down, what I'm trying to say here is, why is it okay for Franky to be a cyborg? And why did Franky even want to be a cyborg in the first place? The answers may seem obvious, but it's still good to link everything together. The second question is, why was Franky so ride or die for Robin and the Straw Hats in such a small amount of time? Especially after beating Usopp up before all of this. It's an extremely Luffy thing to do, to help and risk your life for near strangers. But there's no doubt this is why Franky gets along with Luffy so well. But aside from that, Franky's emotional being is an element we must look into to understand him. And I'd like to pick apart each gear he has to get to the roots of his heart. So, before jumping directly into his backstory, which I'm sure you're all anticipating the most here, I think we must understand his introduction first. From the get-go, Franky has an emphasis on family. We discover his group is called the Franky family. Everyone calls him Big Brother Franky. Mozu and Kiwi are seen as his little sisters. And Franky himself calls everyone brother or sister as well. Even through his villain debut, it's quite easy to see there's more to him than meets the eye. He had beaten Usopp and taken the money. But at that point, it was unfortunate timing for the Straw Hats and for Franky, as Franky only desired the money to be able to make one of his own dreams come true. I must say, Oda is pretty talented at giving us the idea that there's more that lies beneath a character than the surface we are presented with. It's not only the details of Franky having a clear fondness of his found family around him, but the way he begins to unravel when discovering his connection with Kokoro, a woman who the Straw Hats met at one of the sea train stations. Kokoro holds no fear nor displeasure towards Franky, and Chimney even finds him comfortable to talk to. We can deduce from the reactions and conversations they have that there seems to be no ulterior motive on Franky's part, that he truly does just feel anger for the pain Luffy caused his gang, which he started by hurting Usopp, but you know, details. Then there's the fact Franky's family are all literal hooligans. Usopp even calls them one. And while that's a small thing to add, it's a part of his character that is of some importance to his backstory and upbringing. The weird and outlandish designs of himself and his gang does not go unnoticed even in the wacky world of One Piece. The Franky family seeming to be a group of outcasts that all follow the biggest weirdo there is. Which I say lovingly, because I wouldn't want Franky if he weren't a total weirdo. Point is, Franky is presented to us as a big tough guy, but we can see from his emotional state and his way of speech that there's an importance of family. And I know I bring this awful man up a lot, but the contrast between his own Franky family and the Don Quixote pirates shows just how big Franky's heart actually is. We know Doflamingo's so-called family was chosen through their usefulness. We know he let them die if it meant pursuing his greater goals. And we know this family was just a way to elevate himself to greater heights, having to earn the food on their plates and the roof over their heads. Franky's family didn't get as much of a spotlight as individuals, but this was essentially just a group of guys. Franky didn't see his family as weak or lacking for being beaten by the Straw Hats, but instead sought to get revenge for them. He didn't seem to care what each of them could do, and only wanted to find a home for the misfits of Water 7. They all loved Franky as a big brother, and he loved them back as his own brothers and sisters. This may be why Franky was included in Dressrosa, as even though he never really came face to face with Doflamingo, he was the boss of his own family once upon a time. I can only imagine the anger and disgust Franky would have felt had he discovered Doflamingo were using unloved outcasts for power, manipulating the hearts of the weak to boost his own ego. Franky and Doflamingo is a great comparison between what makes a rowdy found family in One Piece and what makes a cult in One Piece. And Franky also shares a lot of similarities with Luffy in this way. The Straw Hats themselves are a bunch of misfits who'd come together, some of them unloved or with lives ruined by greater means, with both Franky and Luffy being the reason for the banding together of these broken souls. The biggest difference here is Franky felt like a more emotionally grounded Luffy, especially considering Water 7 was really showing us Luffy's ability as a captain, both where he lacked and where he exceeded. Franky's talk to Usopp over the Merry is a distinct moment in exhibiting what I mean here, showing Franky's mental maturity and understanding as a leader. Luffy couldn't seem to find the right words to say to calm Usopp down regarding the Merry. He instead let his emotions explode as his anger got the best of him. No matter what he said or did, Usopp was irrational, but they both couldn't keep their heads. Yes, the Merry falling apart was a tough decision, but a captain's job is not only to lead, but to understand the feelings of their crew. Luffy's outburst only made it worse, their argument in no way showing Usopp the reality of the situation, which is what led to the cruel words and the bad decisions. It could be because Franky has his own history with ships, but in the end, Franky knew exactly what Usopp needed to help him see the severity of the Merry's state. Franky talked about the Merry as if she were a person. He talked about how the ship must feel in regards to being unable to carry the crew, and he showed Usopp firsthand just how damaged the Merry was. It might sound stupid, yet sometimes what a person needs isn't logical solutions, but someone who can understand their emotional distress in regards to something that means a lot to them. Franky cried for and with Usopp. Franky wanted to help Usopp see that the Merry was also hurting, and this was something Luffy failed to provide during Usopp's turmoil. This is why Franky's addition in Water 7 was so essential, considering he provides a great example of how Luffy should have handled the situation. Because the question with the Merry wasn't if they needed to replace the ship, it's what they had to do with her afterwards. Usopp understood fully that the Merry couldn't sail anymore. He just didn't know how to part with her, nor where to leave her. Unfortunately, before Franky could help give a solid solution, they were attacked by CP9. And Franky only continues to show the care and maturity he holds while on the sea train with Robin. While the two of them are being taken to Enies lobby, Franky holds a conversation with Robin that feels extremely personal, as Robin tells Franky that her being with the Straw Hats is only hurting them, since her existence is a sin. At this point, Franky reassures her that just her being alive, just because she can read poneglyphs, that doesn't make her existence a sin.
傷つけるのはおめえじゃねえだろ。政府の人間もおめえの存在を罪というが、どんな狂気を抱えていようとも、そこにいるだけで罪になることはねえ。存在することは罪にならねえ。
During this scene, we're shown Tom and his words to a young Franky. Tom saying that the existence of a ship or weapon is neither good nor evil. And I think it's finally time that we get into the real core of Franky's character and story. Similar to Nami, Franky originally had a bad relationship with pirates, and found it fine to steal from the Straw Hats until discovering the kind of crew the Straw Hats really were. This may be confusing at first, as Tom himself was the shipwright to Roger and his crew, but it just shows, given care and respect, Franky will show that care back. Already, this is a base of Franky that's shown by how he is passionate to help Robin and the Straw Hats during Annie's lobby. Franky, known as Cutty Flam back then, was an orphan on Water 7 who was abandoned by pirates. All he did as a child was run around the scrapyard and build his own weapons and ships, all named the Battle Franky. Iceberg was the only person he had who was close to family, until Tom found them and took them under his wing as Shipwright proteges. Tom didn't care for Franky's backstory, but Tom gave Franky a home and a family nonetheless. This family consisted of not only Iceberg and Tom, but Kokoro and Yokozuna as well. Already, this is a family of misfits. As we know, fishmen are not seen as equals on the surface of One Piece's world. From Franky being the abandoned child of pirates, to Yokozuna being a giant toad. They were complete outcasts in the city of Water 7. But, as weird as this family was, they were Tom's family nonetheless. And it becomes increasingly more clear why Franky founded his own family of total outcasts years into the future. He was quite literally raised by them, and he was proud to be one due to Tom's influence, which could probably be why he doesn't find any offense nor malice in being called a pervert. However, this is also just a pun in Japanese of Franky transforming, but nevertheless, it's a small detail of his character that's weirdly sweet. Tom and Iceberg were the two main building points of Franky's character, with Franky becoming the shipwright he is due to Tom's expertise and Iceberg's support. We discover the sea train was made by the three of them, a project that allowed Tom to be pardoned for being Roger's shipwright. But with this story, we discover yet another aspect of One Piece's political landscape that makes the world government so corrupt. The world government never had any intention of allowing Tom to be pardoned, due to the fact he held blueprints for a weapon that could quite literally control the world. And in a cruel twist of fate, they used Franky's battleships to fake an attack in Tom's name. Franky, of course, breaks down, because his name is plastered on every single ship that was used. And it's here we get a speech from Iceberg that is personally one of my favorites in the entire series.
いいか、俺たちの腕はこの世に狂気を生む腕だ。たとえお前にその意志がなくても、狂気は構わず誰かを傷つける。それがお前にとって大切な人間でもだ。こんなことになってもお前に罪がねえと言えるのか。
We find Iceberg's worry in Franky leaving his battleships around has come to fruition, and Iceberg very nearly disowns Franky for the pain he'd caused to both himself and Tom due to leaving such dangerous machinery in the open. I find this interesting specifically, as what Iceberg tells Franky isn't that his weaponry is inherently evil, but whether intentional or not, the weapons they build can be used for evil, and they must understand they hold responsibility for their creations. This is why he was trying to hammer in that Franky shouldn't leave his ships in the open for any to possibly use. And this is an idea that sticks with both Iceberg and Franky years into the future. However, at this point, Franky is so distraught over what had happened that Iceberg's message doesn't completely resonate, until Tom himself punishes Franky for feeling shame over what he'd created. Once again, the message that any weapon created is not inherently evil is enforced, and Tom reprimands Franky while teaching him a creator should not blame the creation, nor should they deny them, but simply be proud of the thing they have created.
この先、お前がどんな船を作ろうと構わねえ。だが、生み出した船が誰を傷つけようと世界を滅ぼそうとも、生みの親だけはそいつを愛さなくちゃならねえ。生み出した者がそいつを否定しちゃならねえ。船を責めるな。
It hurt Tom to see Franky ashamed of his ship so much that he stood up for Franky and against the government to show Franky he shouldn't feel shame for what he's created, and instead should feel anger at how they were used. These two lessons presented by Iceberg and Tom, Iceberg's being the responsibility of creation, and Tom's being the pride of creation, affect Franky for life. There's no doubt this must have been difficult for Franky to realize in the moment, considering the wounds for both Tom and Iceberg Iceberg was still fresh at this point, and the Sea Train embodied these morals completely. The Sea Train was created for good purposes, and by all means had been the reason Water 7 began to thrive as a city. Yet, in a cruel twist of fate, that same Sea Train had been used to carry Tom to his eternal fate in Enies Lobby. But even though the government used it for evil means, Tom still held pride in his creation, with Franky eventually feeling the same after years of healing. As a teenager, Franky sacrificed his own body to try and stop the train. A heartbreaking moment in which he refuses to allow Tom to die by what he feels is his own hands. We finally get to the scene that turns Franky into what he is, and what I believe is the result of everything we have seen and been taught throughout this entire flashback.
廃材、鉄くず。俺には随分落ち着く場所だ。まずこの動かねえ体をなんとかしねえと。
It's at this moment the beliefs of both Iceberg and Tom truly affect him. Franky felt he needed to be stronger, so he modified himself to become a cyborg for this purpose. But we need to think about what building, what creating really means to Franky. Iceberg has told Franky that he must take responsibility for his creations, that no weapon is inherently evil, but whoever uses it for their own purpose is something he must be accountable for. Tom, on the other hand, had told Franky that he can have his regrets, but he must never be ashamed of what he's created. So what does Franky do? Instead of making any more ships or any more weapons, he works on himself. He makes it so only he can use his own weapons, so only he can take responsibility of himself, and he becomes his own creation. And what do we see tattooed on Franky's shoulders? BF36, which stands for the Battle Franky 36. In the time skip, this carries over to be the Battle Franky 37, the new and upgraded version of himself that he holds a lot of pride in. With Franky's design, and with these marks embedded on his shoulders, he has taken both Tom and Iceberg's words to heart. He hasn't rejected his previous creations, keeping his pride in the Battle Frankies by becoming one himself. And now only he can control the thing that previously hurt both of his mentors. These morals are also shown as Franky decides what to do with the ancient weapon blueprints, realizing the government not only wants to use it for evil, but the blueprints merely existing is what has caused Robin to be hunted down and labeled as a devil. Understanding he must make a decision for the original creator of the blueprints, he comes to the decision that the creator wouldn't want their weapon to cause such strife, and in an extremely sexy display, burns the blueprints right in front of CP9. To answer why Franky was so hell-bent on helping the Straw Hats, there's no doubt watching Robin be taken by the Sea Train in the exact same way it took Tom struck a personal chord with him. He refused to let the Sea Train be used for such evil again. He refused to watch another innocent person be forever imprisoned just for existing with the knowledge they held, and found the Straw Hats to be a reflection of his own family. But while Franky has gone through the worst moments of his life from his younger years, making him into who he is, he was still held back by the guilt of what had happened to Tom. Franky still hadn't built anything that wasn't himself. He still felt a fear to create after how his previous ships had been misused, and the Straw Hats gave him that push of courage. Even more than that, Franky had found a person he could trust in Luffy, someone who he believed would use his creations for good, and his faith is what makes Franky agree to Luffy as his captain. So, through the Straw Hats, Franky finds the courage to create and build again. The Sunny being not only his pride and joy, but all the other amazing things he builds throughout the series. The most notable being General Franky, labeled the Battle Franky 38. We never forget where Franky has come from. We never forget what Franky has gone through to be who he is in modern One Piece. And Franky's development comes from the things he builds. Yes, his character may not receive the deepest of plot lines, but as stated previously, this is due to the hardest times having already passed. Now we get to watch Franky live the life he'd been suppressing due to guilt, and the pride he has in each creation never fails to bring me joy. What I think is the most important is we know it doesn't matter how many modifications Franky makes on himself, because he could become a 10-foot tall building. He could become completely unrecognizable as a physical person. But so long as he has his heart, we will always see Franky. Franky's over-emotional and goofy nature is what makes him Franky, which is why he's the perfect character to be the fun cyborg Oda has made him be. The most beautiful thing to me is, with everything we've seen, and with everything Tom has told him, we know Franky holds pride in his creations. We know Franky loves what he builds. And by labeling himself a Battle Franky, we know Franky loves himself. So how can I not love Franky as well? And with that, thanks for watching. Franky is honestly so darling and dear to me, and I know I sound like a broken record with how I talk about the Straw Hats, but I really mean it when I say every single one holds importance to me. Franky certainly gets his own special spot, as I truly loved him immediately from introduction. He's the silliest, goofiest, stupidest cyborg there is, and I absolutely fell for him at first sight. As always, let me know what you think. If anyone was feeling lukewarm on Franky, I hope I helped you see just what a wonderful man he is. Just a quick reminder that I do have a Patreon, and if you would like to support me there, I'd really appreciate it. However, I know not everyone can support me in that way, and just watching and sharing these videos does more than you can imagine for me. If there's anything you'd like to see me cover, One Piece or otherwise, please let me know, and I'll see you in whatever I make next. See ya!